The human screamed as the razor-sharp flint arrowhead pierced his Kevlar vest, proving the old human legends true. On planet Zephyria, the reptilian Brunali warriors stalked the forests like vengeful ghosts. Private Jesse Phillips clutched his wounded side, hot blood seeping through his fingers. His mission to recon Zephyria for colonial prospects had just turned into a fight for survival. Jesse locked eyes with the Brunali huntress who had shot him, her green scales glistening and slit pupils narrowing. He had to get back to the dropship and warn the expedition force. But the huntress notched another arrow, hissing something in an alien tongue. Jesse's translator implant deciphered it a second later. Surrender or die, forest ghost. Shit. The creatures of Zephyria could talk, and they apparently had legends about humans from the first recon missions decades ago. Jesse weighed his options as more armed Brunali melted out of the dense foliage, longbows trained on his vitals. He was low on ammo and losing blood fast. Gritting his teeth, Jesse slowly raised his hands. The huntress motioned with her bow. He let her take his weapon and restrain his arms with a vine. She prodded him to march. As they headed deeper into the trees, Jesse caught the huntress studying him with a mix of fear and awe, as if he were a mythical phantom made flesh. Soon, a sprawling village of woven huts came into view, built into the titanic roots of a mile-high world tree. Hundreds of Brunali gathered to stare in amazement at the alien interloper. Jesse was shoved to his knees before a wizened Brunali with a feathered headdress, the chieftain. The chieftain snarled questions that Jesse's implant frantically translated. Where was he from? Why did he violate their ancestral hunting grounds? Was he a spirit or a demon? Jesse gave away nothing about the human plans for Zephyria. He said he was just an explorer who got lost. But the chief spotted Jesse's high-tech plasma rifle and tactical armor. He declared the human a potential invader. Narrowing his eyes, the chieftain proclaimed that Jesse would have to prove his intentions, benevolent or hostile, in a trial by combat against the huntress who captured him. Only then would his fate be decided. Jesse balked. This was insane. He tried to protest, but the Brunali warriors were already forming a ring around him and the huntress, who hefted a wickedly serrated bone sword. She looked resigned to her deadly duty. Jesse had no choice. He couldn't gun down these people and risk a full-scale war with the natives. But he also couldn't allow himself to die on this remote world, his mission incomplete. He drew his combat knife as the Brunali chanted. Before the duel could begin, a frantic messenger stumbled into the circle, his scales pale with dread. The chief listened to his gasped report, then turned to Jesse with a grim frown. The human tried to decipher the rapid exchange. It seemed a rival Brunali clan had attacked a border outpost with weapons that spat blue fire, plasma rifles, just like his own. And the invaders wore strange metal skins, almost like human combat armor. A flash of realization crossed the chieftain's face. Perhaps this lone human was not his true enemy today. An older and more treacherous foe threatened both their kinds, bearing the tools of the newcomers, but the savagery of a Brunali blood feud. The chief held up a hand to halt the duel. He pointed to the huntress, then to Jesse. With a solemn rasp, the chief tasked them with tracking down these mysterious raiders before their conflict engulfed all. Two enemies would have to become allies. Jesse looked to the huntress, Lyra, and saw his own wary determination reflected in her reptilian eyes. The Brunali's ancient forests suddenly felt as perilous as the darkest reaches of space. A hostile universe had just become deadlier. Somewhere in the canopy, a predator's howl rattled the night. Jesse gripped his knife tighter. He was millions of miles from home, with only a distrustful alien warrior to aid him, and a conspiracy to unravel that could doom both their worlds to endless war. Jesse and Lyra crept through the dense underbrush, the towering world trees casting long shadows in the fading light. The attacked Brunali outpost lay just ahead, a smoldering ruin. Jesse winced as he pushed aside a thorny vine, his injured side aching with each step. Lyra moved like a ghost beside him, her bow at the ready. As they approached the devastated outpost, the extent of the destruction became clear. Wooden palisades lay splintered and charred. Corpses of fallen Brunali warriors were strewn about, their scales blackened by plasma fire. Jesse knelt beside a crater, picking up a twisted shard of metal. His heart sank as he recognized the alloy, an experimental composite used in prototype Federation weapons. "This tech is from Earth," Jesse said grimly, holding up the fragment. "Reverse-engineered from Zorgon raiders and Krell warships, deemed too unstable for military use." Lyra's eyes flashed with anger. "Your people supplied these arms? To be used against us?" Jesse shook his head. "Not my people. Rogue factions, greedy corporations. They don't care about the damage they cause." He met Lyra's accusing gaze. "I swear, I'll stop this, whatever it takes." Lyra's tail lashed, but she nodded curtly. Jesse pulled out his scanner and swept it over the ruins, searching for any trace of the forbidden weapons. A faint energy signature pulsed on the display, leading deeper into the jungle. Slipping through the dense foliage, Jesse and Lyra followed the trail, senses straining for any sign of danger. Night creatures stirred in the canopy, their eerie cries echoing through the darkness. After several tense hours, they reached a hidden rebel camp nestled in a ravine. Crouching behind a fallen log, Jesse surveyed the camp through his visor's magnification. Dozens of Brunali insurgents patrolled between crude huts, plasma rifles cradled in their claws. A central tent glowed with the telltale light of computer screens. "We need to get inside that command tent," Jesse whispered. "If I can access their systems, I might find out where they're getting these weapons." Lyra pointed to a gap in the patrols. "We go now, quick and quiet." Moving as one, they sprinted for the tent, darting from shadow to shadow. Jesse sliced through the fabric wall with his knife, and they slipped inside. Banks of alien computers hummed, their interfaces pulsing with strange symbols. Jesse connected his decoder to the nearest console, his implant translating the flashing script. "By the gods," he breathed. "They're planning a coup against your chieftains. With these weapons, they'll be unstoppable." Lyra growled low in her throat. "They dishonor themselves. True warriors do not rely on alien fire magic." Data scrolled across Jesse's visor. "There's a rendezvous set with the smugglers. 2 days from now, at a place called the Shattered Peaks. They're bringing more weapons, enough to equip a small army." Voices approached the tent. Lyra hissed a warning. Jesse yanked his decoder free, the download incomplete but enough. They dove out the back just as the flap opened. Shouts of alarm rang out behind them as they sprinted into the jungle, plasma bolts sizzling through the undergrowth. Heart pounding, Jesse led Lyra up a winding game trail, away from the camp. They climbed into the hills until the rebels' furious bellows faded to silence under the chirping of night birds. Jesse sagged against a tree, breathing hard. Lyra scanned the darkness, her serpentine eyes gleaming. "They will hunt us now," she said matter-of-factly. "Your off-worlders and mine. A fine prize we will make." Jesse squeezed his eyes shut. What had started as a simple recon had turned into a nightmare of galactic proportions. But one thing was clear. He had to reach those shattered peaks and stop the smugglers, before Zephyria burned. Over the next day, they slogged through uncharted wilds, following the smugglers' trail. Jesse told Lyra of Earth's blue oceans and green forests, so different from Zephyria's primeval jungles. In turn, she shared the legends of her people, of noble hunters and capricious spirit animals. A strange bond grew between the human soldier and the alien warrior. When Lyra stumbled into a patch of venomous thorn vines, Jesse pulled her free and treated the burning welts with salve from his medkit. And when a Zephyrian raptor lizard pounced at Jesse from the underbrush, Lyra's barbed arrows caught it in the eye. As they made camp on the second night, Jesse's comm implant crackled to life. A cold knot formed in his gut as he listened to the message. "Phillips, this is Captain Rains. We're en route to Zephyria, ETA 24 hours. Command knows about the weapons deal. You're to eliminate all evidence of our involvement. No witnesses, including the natives." Rains's voice was hard. They're a liability, Jesse. Take care of them. Starting with that Brunali bitch. It's them or us. Rain's out. The transmission cut off, leaving Jesse in stunned silence. He looked up to find Lyra watching him, her expression unreadable. In that moment, he made his choice. When my squad arrives, he said quietly, they're going to try to kill you. Kill all the Brunali. Lyra tensed, her hand dropping to her blade. Jesse raised his palms. I won't let that happen, whatever it takes, even if I have to fight my own kind. His voice cracked. I can't let them hurt you, hurt your people. For a long moment, Lyra was silent. Then she stepped forward and rested her clawed hand on Jesse's shoulder. You are not like the other off-worlders, she said softly. You have honor. We will face this together. Jesse swallowed hard and nodded. In the distance, the shattered peaks loomed, jagged and forbidding. Somewhere in that maze of canyons, the smugglers were waiting, and soon his own squad would be hunting them. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. Come what may, a human soldier and a Brunali warrior would stand as one. Against the odds, against all enemies. The fate of two worlds hung in the balance, and time was running out. Jesse and Lyra pushed through the dense foliage, racing against time to reach the rendezvous coordinates. The jungle gave way to a vast gorge, its sheer cliffs stretching into the mist above. We need to get through this quickly, Jesse panted, checking his tracking sensors. The smugglers could arrive any minute. Lyra nodded grimly, her scales glistening with sweat. They began their descent into the gorge, loose rocks skittering down the steep path. As they reached the bottom, Jesse's sensors beeped urgently. Energy signatures, he whispered, coming from underneath us? The ground rumbled. Massive, segmented creatures burst from the earth, their razor-sharp pincers snapping. Subterranean predators, perfectly adapted to ambush prey in the gorge. Run! Lyra shouted, notching an arrow. They sprinted through the chaos, dodging pincers and acidic spittle. Jesse's sensors led them to a dark opening in the cliff face. Without hesitation, they plunged into the ominous tunnel network. Pitch blackness engulfed them. Jesse activated his night vision, revealing twisting passageways stretching in all directions. They moved cautiously, their footsteps echoing in the oppressive silence. Suddenly Jesse tensed, movement ahead. Before they could react, harsh light flooded the tunnel. They found themselves surrounded by a dozen Brunali warriors, plasma rifles trained on them. A familiar figure stepped forward, sneering. Well, well, if it isn't the traitor and her pet human, Lasgar, Lyra's old rival, spat. Consorting with forest ghosts now, Lyra? How far you've fallen. Lyra snarled, but Jesse put a restraining hand on her arm. They were hopelessly outnumbered. Drop your weapons, Lasgar ordered. You're coming with us. With no choice, Jesse and Lyra surrendered. The rebels bound their hands and marched them through the tunnels. Eventually, they emerged into a hidden valley where a sprawling rebel camp lay before them. They were brought to a large tent in the center of the camp. Inside, a fierce-looking Brunali female lounged on a makeshift throne of scavenged tech. Her eyes gleamed with cruel intelligence. I am Merga, she announced, leader of this glorious insurrection. Now tell me, spies, what have you learned of our plans? Jesse kept his face neutral. We're just travelers. Got lost in the tunnels. Merga's tail lashed in irritation. Lies. You were heading for the rendezvous point. She gestured to a guard. Bring me the human's gear. Jesse's stomach dropped as they examined his tech. Merga's eyes narrowed. Still feeling talkative, human? She raised a clawed hand to Lyra's throat. Or shall I execute your Brunali friend? Jesse's mind raced. He couldn't let Lyra die. Wait, he shouted. I'll tell you what I know. Lyra hissed in dismay as Jesse revealed the rendezvous details. Merga's smile was triumphant. Excellent, she purred. Soon, we'll have weapons to rival the chieftains, and you two will be the first to witness our victory before you die. They were thrown into a crude cell to await their fate. As dawn broke, the camp stirred with activity. A low rumble filled the air as a massive ship descended into the valley. From their cell, Jesse and Lyra watched in horror as crate after crate of devastating weaponry was unloaded. Plasma cannons, warheads, enough firepower to level cities. With this arsenal, Murga gloated, we'll crush Azakai and his backward traditionalists. A new era for the Brunali begins today. Suddenly, the sky erupted with weapons fire. Jesse's blood ran cold as he recognized the ships attacking the camp. "That's my recon team," he breathed. "But why are they firing on everyone?" The camp dissolved into chaos. Rebels and smugglers alike were cut down in the barrage. In the confusion, Jesse managed to slip his bonds and free Lyra. "We have to stop this," he said. "Both sides, it's gone too far." Lyra nodded grimly. As they ran for cover, Jesse spotted a familiar face, Lieutenant Harris, his squad leader, gunning down Brunali with cold efficiency. "Harris!" Jesse shouted. "What are you doing? These aren't all hostiles." Harris turned, his eyes hard. "Stand down, Phillips. We're burying this whole operation. No witnesses." Jesse felt sick. He looked at Lyra, saw the fear and anger in her eyes. In that moment, he made his choice. "No," he said firmly. "I won't let you do this." Without warning, Jesse tackled Harris, wrestling for his weapon. "Run!" he shouted to the nearby Brunali. "Get to safety!" As the battle raged around them, Jesse fought his former comrades, using every dirty trick he knew to stay alive and buy time for the Brunali to escape. "Humanity's brought enough bloodshed to this world," he growled, dodging plasma fire. "I won't let you commit genocide to cover your tracks." In the chaos, Murga seized her chance. She and her loyal followers grabbed what weapons they could and fled towards the capital. Lyra's eyes widened in realization. "Jesse, we have to stop her. With those weapons, she could wipe out millions." Jesse nodded grimly. They gathered what allies they could, a ragtag group of rebels who opposed Murga's extremism, and set off in pursuit. Over the next days, they waged a guerrilla campaign against Murga's forces. Jesse's human tactics, combined with Lyra's knowledge of the terrain, allowed them to ambush weapon convoys and sabotage stockpiles. Slowly, they whittled away at Murga's advantage, stalling her advance on the capital. Word spread of their exploits, rallying more of Azakai's warriors to their cause. Finally, they reached the outskirts of the Brunali capital. Murga's remaining forces were entrenched, preparing for a final push. Jesse and Lyra knew they were outgunned. "We need a plan," Jesse said, surveying the enemy positions. Lyra's eyes lit up. "The tunnels! We can use them to flank Murga's heavy weapons." She quickly outlined her strategy. While Lyra led a portion of their forces as a decoy, Jesse would take the rest through the subterranean network for a pincer attack. As night fell, they put the plan into action. Lyra's group engaged Murga's front lines, drawing fire and attention. Meanwhile, Jesse led his team through the twisting tunnels, using their dwindling supply of human ordnance to collapse key sections behind them. They emerged behind Murga's artillery, catching the rebels completely by surprise. In the ensuing chaos, Murga's carefully laid plans fell apart. The battle raged through the night. Murga's fanatical commanders fell one by one. As dawn broke, Jesse spotted Murga herself, frantically trying to rally her troops. Lyra intercepted her, and the two Brunali warriors clashed in a vicious duel. Jesse provided covering fire, keeping Murga's guards at bay as Lyra pressed her advantage. With a final, desperate lunge, Lyra disarmed Murga and forced her to yield. The rebellion's leader was taken into custody, her dreams of conquest shattered. In the aftermath, Jesse oversaw the destruction of the remaining human weapons, ensuring they could never be used to threaten the Brunali again. To his surprise, Chieftain Azakai approached him. The old Brunali's eyes were solemn but not unkind. "You have shown great honor," Azakai said, "for a forest ghost." A hint of amusement touched his voice. "For your service to our people, I grant you a full pardon. You may walk freely among us." Jesse bowed his head, overwhelmed by the gesture. He and Lyra climbed to a ridge overlooking the capital. Smoke still rose from the battle sites, a stark reminder of the destruction wrought by human interference and Brunali ambition. "There's so much to rebuild," Lyra said softly. Jesse nodded. "And not just buildings. Trust between our peoples." They stood in silence, watching the sun rise over Zephyria. The real work. Jesse and Lyra strode into the Brunali capital, their bodies weary but spirits high. Cheers erupted from the gathered crowds as news of Murga's defeat spread. Azakai himself greeted them at the grand hall, his weathered face creased with a rare smile. "You have saved countless lives," the chieftain said, clasping Jesse's arm. "Both of you." But their moment of triumph was short-lived. A human dropship thundered overhead, touching down in the central plaza. Admiral Groves marched out, flanked by a squad of heavily armed Marines. "Phillips!" Groves barked. "Front and center! You're coming with us!" Jesse's heart made as he faced his superior officer. The Admiral's cold eyes swept over the gathering, lingering on Lyra with barely concealed disgust. "Sir, with all due respect," Jesse began. Groves cut him off. "Save it. You've jeopardized everything we've worked for. Do you have any idea how many protocols you've violated?" Azakai stepped forward, his tail lashing. "This human saved my people from civil war. He deserves praise, not punishment." "Stay out of this, alien," Groves sneered. "This is an internal human matter." The atmosphere grew tense as Brunali warriors and human Marines sized each other up. Jesse's hand inched towards his sidearm. "Those Brunali deaths were collateral damage," Groves continued. "Unfortunate, but necessary to maintain our interests. You're a traitor, Phillips, aiding the enemy over your own species." "The enemy?" Jesse's voice rose. "These people aren't our enemies. We came here under false pretenses. We armed rebels and nearly caused a genocide." Groves' face reddened. "That's classified information, soldier. You're looking at a court-martial for even mentioning it." "I don't care," Jesse said, stepping back to stand beside Lyra. "I won't be part of this cover-up. Earth has no right to dominate these people." "Dominate?" Groves laughed coldly. "We're securing humanity's future among the stars, at any cost." Jesse looked at Lyra, then at Azakai and the gathered Brunali. He made his choice. "Then count me out," he said firmly. "I hereby resign from the UEF military, effective immediately. My loyalty is to the truth, and to the Brunali." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Groves' face contorted with rage. "You can't do that," he roared. "Marines, arrest this deserter!" The human soldiers raised their weapons, but found themselves surrounded by snarling Brunali warriors. Lyra notched an arrow, aiming it at Groves' head. "Jesse is under my protection," Azakai declared. "Leave now, Admiral, or face the consequences." Groves glared at them all, then spat on the ground. "This isn't over, Phillips. I'll burn this whole planet to ash if that's what it takes to silence you." As the dropship lifted off, Jesse turned to Lyra and Azakai. "We need to warn the other races," he said urgently. "Earth won't stop here. They'll keep pushing for dominance, planet by planet." Lyra nodded grimly. "The human command center. If we can access their communications array." "A strike team," Azakai mused. "Fast and silent, it may be our only chance." Under cover of darkness, Jesse led Lyra and a group of elite Brunali warriors towards the sprawling human base. They slipped past patrols and automated defenses, using Jesse's inside knowledge to bypass security. Alarms blared as they fought their way to the central control room. Jesse's fingers flew over the consoles, uploading data on the weapons deals and Earth's true agenda. "It's done," he said, hitting the final command. "Transmitting to every known civilization in range." As they escaped the base, the sky lit up with the telltale flashes of ships dropping out of hyperspace, alien vessels of all shapes and sizes, drawn by Jesse's warning. But Groves wasn't finished. His flagship descended through the atmosphere, weapons primed. "All ships, commence planetary bombardment," the Admiral's voice crackled over the comms. "Wipe this rock clean." Jesse stared in horror as the first energy beams lanced down from orbit. The war for Zephyria and the destiny of the universe had only just begun. The Brunali capital shuddered under the relentless barrage of Admiral Grove's battleships. Jesse and Lyra crouched behind a crumbling wall, dust and debris raining down around them. "We can't hold out much longer," Jesse shouted over the din of explosions. Lyra's eyes blazed with fierce intensity. "We must, for our people." They sprinted from cover to cover, rallying the beleaguered Brunali defenders. Lyra's voice rang out, issuing rapid-fire orders in her native tongue. Jesse marveled at her tactical brilliance as she directed hit-and-run strikes against the invading human forces. "There!" Jesse pointed to a weak spot in the enemy line. "If we can punch through there, we can flank their artillery." Lyra nodded, signaling to a group of warriors. They charged forward, catching the human troops off guard. Jesse's rifle barked as he provided covering fire, downing 3 soldiers in quick succession. But for every small victory, the defenders paid in blood. Buildings collapsed, burying Brunali civilians. The acrid stench of burning flesh filled the air. As they regrouped in a bombed-out plaza, a familiar figure limped towards them. Azakai, the Brunali chieftain, his scales caked with dust and blood. "My friends," he wheezed, "you fight with honor, but I fear—" His words were cut short by the whine of an incoming orbital strike. Jesse's eyes widened in horror as he saw the telltale shimmer of the energy beam. "Look out!" he cried, lunging forward. But Azakai was faster. With surprising agility, the old chieftain shoved Jesse aside. The beam struck, vaporizing concrete and flesh alike. When the dust settled, Azakai lay broken on the ground, his body shielding Jesse from the worst of the blast. "No!" Lyra wailed, rushing to her leader's side. Azakai's breath came in ragged gasps. He grasped Lyra's hand, then Jesse's. "Listen, both of you. You must lead our people now, together, human and Brunali. Only then can we survive." With a final shuddering breath, Azakai's eyes closed. Lyra threw back her head and howled, a primal sound of grief and rage. Jesse placed a hand on her shoulder. "Lyra, She whirled on him, eyes blazing. "Groves will pay for this, for all of it. I swear it." As if in answer to her vow, the sky above them filled with new ships. But these weren't human vessels. Alien craft of all shapes and sizes dropped out of hyperspace, drawn by Jesse's transmitted warning. A familiar voice crackled over their comms. "This is Admiral Yusuf. We received your distress call. The atrocities stop here." Hope flickered in Jesse's chest as he watched the alien armada engage Groves's forces. But the Admiral wasn't done yet. Alarms blared across the battlefield as Groves's flagship descended through the atmosphere. "All ships commence firing," Groves's cold voice rang out. "Deploy the bioweapon. Leave nothing alive." Jesse's blood ran cold. He grabbed Lyra's arm. "We have to stop him, now!" They fought their way through the chaos, commandeering a small craft to reach Groves's damaged flagship. As they approached, Jesse saw the weapon ports opening, ready to unleash unimaginable horror on Zephyria. "There's no time," Lyra hissed. "We must destroy the ship entirely." Jesse shook his head. "Too many innocents on board. We go in. We end this." They breached the hull, fighting their way through panicked crew members and malfunctioning systems. On the bridge, they found Groves, a mad gleam in his eyes as he prepared to unleash devastation. "Phillips," Groves sneered. "Come to watch your new home burn?" Jesse leveled his weapon at his former commander. "It's over, Groves. Stand down." The Admiral laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "You still don't understand, do you? Humanity was bred for this. Created by beings beyond your comprehension, then abandoned, left to claw our way to the stars. And now you deny us our birthright?" Jesse's mind reeled at the revelation, but he kept his aim steady. "Even if that's true, it doesn't justify this." Groves lunged, cybernetic enhancements giving him impossible speed. Jesse fired, but the Admiral was already upon him. They grappled across the bridge, Jesse's training barely a match for Groves's augmented strength. Lyra joined the fray, her Brunali agility allowing her to land several stinging blows. But Groves adapted, his artificial reflexes learning with each exchange. He caught Lyra with a vicious backhand, sending her sprawling. "Enough games," Groves snarled, pinning Jesse to the deck. His cybernetic hand closed around Jesse's throat. "I'll kill you both, then finish what I started." Darkness crept into Jesse's vision. Then a thunderous impact rocked the ship. Admiral Yusuf's vessels had breached their defenses, disabling the flagship's weapons. In that moment of distraction, Jesse broke free. He tackled Groves, the two men crashing into the main console. Alarms blared as systems overloaded. Groves, bloodied but unbowed, sneered, "You're too late." His hand slammed down on a final control. "If I can't have this world, no one will."
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel. And for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.